Alright, so we just got done talking about antivirus programs and why those are useful to have around. So now we're going to talk about a couple of maintenance programs that are also good to have installed and run every once in a while. Uh, the two in particular that I'm going to talk about are called Defraggler and CCleaner. And I'll get to CCleaner in a second, but right now I'm going to talk about Defraggler, which is a defragmentation program. Basically, fragmentation is what happens as you use your computer more and more. When you install applications, when you write documents with Microsoft Word, when you download programs from the internet, even just surfing the web, you are downloading and using files that need to be stored on your hard drive. Well, eventually they pile up, and when you get a file that is too big for a pocket of free space on your hard drive, instead of trying to fit it in and then just moving some of the file elsewhere, it puts it on the end as a contiguous file, which is good for the immediate loading time of the program. But the problem is if you get enough files that do that and you start running low on free space, you get a disk that looks something like this, where you have some contiguous files and then you have these pockets of free space where there's not enough space to fit in programs. So the problem with that is once you run out of space for files, it starts putting them in wherever it can and splitting them all up, which wears out your hard drive a little bit more, because instead of just being able to read each file one right after each other, it has to go and look around for all the different pieces of the file in different spots. Not only does that wear out your hard drive, but also it makes it so that your programs load slower, because then the application has to wait for the hard drive just for a little bit, but it's just enough to make loading longer. It has to wait for the hard drive to find all the different pieces of the file and put them all back together again in the right order. So it's a good idea to run a defragmentation program every once in a while to cut down on that. So there aren't that many differences between all the different defragmentation programs. They all basically do the same thing. Windows has their own built-in one, but I prefer Defraggler just because it has a couple of extra options. It's got a search function so that you can search for files that might be lost or you just want to get a hold of. You've got your drive map that shows you all the different files, and you've got statistics for your hard drive, so it'll tell me, the temperature for it. It's got the serial number, disk read errors, anything like that that'll return stuff. So that's the only real reason I prefer Defraggler over the Windows one, is because it's got a little bit more utility than Windows does. So first thing I want to do is analyze a drive, which will return the level of fragmentation on the drive and whether or not it thinks it needs a fragmentation, or a defragmentation, I'm sorry. So I've got 11% fragmentation on this hard drive. So if I want to defrag it, I could quick defrag it, which just moves the easier files around, or I could do a more thorough defragmentation, which will move all the files it can around, and it'll build a list and then it'll go on its way. And you can see the red files are the fragmented ones and the blue ones are basically in order. So it'll move around files and it'll run for a while depending on how big your hard drive is. So if you've got a terabyte hard drive with lots of files, and some are, archives, some are different, some are media, it'll take a little bit longer than if you have a smaller hard drive with less files on it, obviously. And while it's running, it'll take up a pretty good chunk of system resources, and that's the only real drawback to using a defragmentation program, is that while it's running, you'll just have a little bit less RAM and memory to use. So that's Defraggler. And so the next program is CCleaner. CCleaner is a convenient little program that allows you to scan a bunch of different files. So we've got, temporary internet files, the recycle bin, other temporary Windows files. Um, it's got a bunch of different customization options that you can clean. And so if I hit analyze here, it'll return just a little bit. I ran this program earlier, so I don't really have that much data on my computer to clean. But, we've got some internet cache, some Windows files that don't really need. So this will just go in and clear out anything that's just kind of sitting, doesn't really need to be taking up space. So, and you can have upwards of a couple of gigabytes of data just sitting there taking up space that you don't really even need, and this will just go in and run it and clean it all out, and it doesn't take that long, even if you have a lot of files sitting around. So that's its primary module, but it does have a couple of other useful modules that are worth mentioning as well. It's got a registry cleaner, which looks basically under the hood of Windows. It takes a look at what Windows looks at every time you run an application or open a file. The registry is what Windows looks at, while sometimes programs can get in there and, when you want to install a program, it could leave a file extension for a file that doesn't exist anymore, so you might not need that file extension anymore. So you can fix those up, and so that's useful for fixing problems that might not be completely obvious. Other modules we've got are an uninstall module that's a little bit more robust than the Windows one. So if you've got a program that you want to uninstall, but it won't uninstall by itself, you can try using the Windows uninstaller, and if that still won't work, you could try using this one, which you can go in and delete it directly from using CCleaner's uninstaller. So that's useful. The next thing is a startup monitor, which allows you to look at the programs that automatically start themselves when Windows starts. So if your startup is being bogged down by a bunch of different programs that are starting up right when Windows starts up, and you don't want them running at the beginning, you can come in here and tell them, I want to disable you at the startup, and it won't run it when your computer starts up. So that's useful. The next useful module is the System Restore, which allows you to roll back your computer to previous System Restore points. And System Restore points are often created when you update your computer with Windows updates. Sometimes when you update your video drivers, it will give you a System Restore point. And this will let you roll back your Windows installation to, let's see, the last one I have is 3.9, so 3 days ago. So that'll roll my installation back. So if you've got a troublesome program that won't uninstall at all, you can roll back to before it was even installed on your computer. And generally speaking, this doesn't really affect your files. So if you've got, a study guide or a document or a project you've been working on, rolling back your computer generally doesn't touch those files. So, and last but not least, we have a drive wiper, which allows you to reformat a hard drive with a bit more security than normal. So if you've got private, financial data or something like that you don't want to be recovered, you can use this it'll overwrite the data, and you can have it up to 35 rewrites, which is a little bit extravagant, but, some people are security crazy. So if you're really, really adamant about no one being able to read your deleted files, you can always use a drive wiper. And I believe that's it for CCleaner. So that's a useful little utility. So, and the last thing I'll mention is Windows updates, which I just scanned mine earlier today. I had a funny incident where I was recording this video and it popped up and restarted Windows while I was busy. So sometimes it's better to have this stuff on schedule so you can tell it instead of manually searching for updates or manually defragging your hard drive or manually having to clear out all the temporary files. You can actually tell it and install updates every day at 3 a.m. or whenever you're not using your computer. So if your computer's on at 3 a.m. and it'll automatically go and search for updates or automatically defragment your hard drive if that's what you have it configured to do, which can be convenient. But either way, Windows updates are good to have because Microsoft will periodically release security updates, updates for compatibility, all different updates that do different things. So those are good to have too. So that's just some general guidelines for keeping a computer in normal working condition and trying to mitigate some of the normal file wear and tear on your computer. So that's it.